The movie Poor Things, which has received critical acclaim, is actually one of the most blasphemous movies to be released this year. It includes things like and pet on top of everything else. So just kind of to lay the plot down, here's essentially what the movie's about. The movie follows a character named Bella, who's actually Emma Stone in the film. You've probably seen the trailers, and she's the primary protagonist in this movie. One of the other characters that we're introduced to early on is Willem Dafoe, who plays Godwin. Here's the first peek into the blasphemy. Godwin is actually called God throughout the entire movie. We come to find out that Bella actually is someone who offed herself, but she was pregnant with a fetus. So Godwin took out the fetus's brain and put it into Bella's head. So inside of Godwin's house, everything is black and white and gray. It's very boring. And we see some examples of Godwin, God in this context, trying to protect Bella from the world outside. Sounds a lot like Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. Well, Bella eventually takes that forbidden fruit and goes out into the world. Keep in mind that Bella has the mind of a child, so she's out there experiencing things for the first time, but this also includes relationships with grown men. Despite her having a woman's body, she has the mind of a child. This sounds a lot like pedophilia. What makes it even weirder is that Bella's ex-husband, her actual father, then finds her and says, "We were married," and he wants her back. So there is on top of it. This all comes to a climax when at the end, Godwin, or God, dies, and Bella takes on his role as a surgeon, putting in the brain of a goat into her ex-husband. Now, this movie is weird and obviously blasphemous and obviously nasty, but if we look at the author of the book, this isn't the first time that he's done something like this. Alistair Day, who wrote Poor Things, has a number of other works talking about God, heaven, and hell, and one thing that stood out to me in particular is something that he wrote called A Complaint to God. I'm going to read a little bit of that right now. Keep in mind, this is from one of his earlier books. The more he worked, the more the furious figure of God kept popping up and having to be removed. God driving out Adam and Eve for learning to tell right from wrong, which is the most incredible, simplistic way to think about this whole process, right? That's not what happened at all, but this is his retelling of it. And if we skip down a little bit, this is kind of crazy. God, sick to death of his own violent nature, tried to let divine mercy into the world by getting hung as the criminal he was. God is not a criminal. He is spotless, he is blameless, and so is Jesus. Jesus was the spotless, blameless Lamb of God. So in summary, you have a book produced by somebody who hates God or has a distasteful view of God, produced by Hollywood, who is always kind of putting God in a negative light, and then as a result of it, awarding this movie with all kinds of accolades and great critical acclaim. What we see is in the last days that people will become lovers of themselves, idolaters, blasphemers, among other things, and this is a reflection of that. But also, it's not the first time that this kind of movie has been put out. We've even seen movies like Dune, for example, that have a false messiah prophecy. We see movies like Babylon that expose the real behind the scenes of what Hollywood actually is, and again, receives critical acclaim. And even movies like Pleasantville, which imitate this exact same kind of process of gray around God in a safe environment, protective. When you start getting out and exploring sin, that's when color starts arriving. That's when excitement starts arriving. And it's always this kind of inverted thing where knowledge is a good thing, but knowledge that's outside of the realm of God. But anyways, we plan on seeing or expect to see this more and more. And it's not unusual, shouldn't be surprising, but let's guard our hearts and our minds and kind of, prepare ourselves to acknowledge whatever Hollywood is putting out, whatever big media companies are putting out, it's usually going to be in direct opposition and direct rebellion against God. And thankfully, we have more options available now today than ever before. But with that in mind, let's continue to guard our hearts, keep our eyes on Christ, focus on him. And when we know the truth, when we know God, when we know the real thing, we can call out the counterfeit really easily. But anyways, thanks for watching and God bless.